Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday for Starfinder Wednesday, #1. This is the first one we're doing. We're really excited that you can join us. We are coming to you from the Pacific Northwest. Smoky air quality is not good right now. I'm not going to lie. If you don't need to go outside, stay indoors because it's not good right now. But thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be talking about Starfinder, and then if there's time, we're going to talk about some Starfinder, and then more Starfinder. But it's also going to be a lot of things that you haven't seen before. It's going to be a lot of information you haven't heard before, and a recap like everybody loves. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce my guests. Today, I've got Amanda and Owen in the studio today. We are doing this first episode of Starfinder, and so of course it was, who do we get for the first one? And when we decided the best way to start would be a Gen Con recap, it was like, well, sure, let's start with some of that. And these two happily stepped up to fall on the sword to be the first guests of the show. And this is really embarrassing to admit, but Owen, this is your first time on the show.
It is my first time on the show.
Man, oh man, I messed up on that. You should have been on a long time ago. So, can you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves to the crowd out there?
So, I'm Owen Casey Stevens, and I'm the Starfinder design lead.
And I am Amanda Hamon Kunz, and I am the managing developer for Starfinder.
Great, great, great. And I'm Dan, your old buddy. So, first off, we're going to try to do some Q&A towards the end of the show if there's time, which I think there's going to. I think we'll have time for some Q&A. I don't think we're really packed as far as like what we're looking to get into. But I wanted to make sure we did a show, like a Gen Con recap show on the Pathfinder show, which is now Pathfinder Friday, not Paizo Friday. We did a show that was a Gen Con recap and what happened and all of that sort of thing. And so it just seemed like it would be a good idea to start off this show with a Gen Con recap. So, from a Starfinder point of view, what happened? What'd you see? What were you excited about? What were you really happy about?
Sure. So Gen Con is a very special place for us, right? Our game launched at Gen Con last year. We had phenomenal response to it. It was unlike anything I had really ever experienced, just seeing people interact with our game and people so excited to play and to get their hands on the core rulebook and see all of the beautiful art and the rules and the systems that we had worked so hard on and been so passionate about personally to get that out into the wild. So this was our second Gen Con, and the whole team was there, and we ran panels, and we had a table of Starfinder product in our booth, and we attended the Annie Awards. We were nominated for a few of those, and in general just were able to reveal some news and just have a really good time interacting with our fans.
Yeah, and we have an Annie here.
We won a silver Annie for best cartography for
awesome.
The Pact Worlds book, which we're very, very happy about, and it goes lovely with just about anything. It turns out that there is no fashion statement that a giant silver medal does not make better. But it is true that there's a direct link between sort of our timeline and Gen Con, because we released it at Gen Con last year, and the book sold out. And a lot of other stuff sold out. We had more than just the core rulebook last year. We had accessories and combat pads and stuff. So we had a new product this year. We had the Armory, which we were very excited to have out. It's got a lot of equipment and gear and even some character options in it. So, of course, we brought a lot of the Armory because it was our new release for Starfinder to Gen Con, and we sold out again. So, obviously, we have not yet pinned down just exactly how to calculate sales at Gen Con, which is not a complaint. We are delighted that you all are loving this more than we expect you to, but it does mean that we are going to have to try and figure out how to have enough of the next product next time.
Yeah. So this was the item that was in limited supply. It turned out we had no idea that it was going to be.
We've got calculations on how many of a new hardback of an existing game line to bring, and those calculations just didn't hold up this time. Which again is delightful, but since we're only a year old, we're sort of still getting used to what the possible appetite for new content is. You don't want to make more game product than people will buy, because then you end up not making any money. I mean, just simply, right? So you got to guess at your print run. You got to guess how many you got to bring. You got to guess what the appropriate size is. as an example, since it's been a year, we originally were doing our adventure paths one every other month because a lot of people had said that maybe an adventure path every month was too much. Turns out those aren't the fans of Starfinder who have been kind of consistently saying they want more. So now that we are going to be launching our second adventure path, we will be going to monthly with those. And that's just the sort of adjustment we're trying to make as we get a feel for what the market will actually absorb and want and what the correct volume of material is.
Right, right. And I might be wrong in remembering this, but was it Friday or Saturday?
It was Friday.
Friday.
It was Friday, around midday Friday when
it was the best 2 days in gaming for Starfinder.
It was.
And then our hardback went out. So, so that is too bad. But I think again, it was internally with our conversations that we were having, it was the idea to say, look, we have to make sure that we're sticking, supporting Starfinder, because right now, I don't know if you've heard, but we're playtesting a game called the Pathfinder Playtest.
Not in my department.
A lot of my time talking about this game.
That's a thing. It's over there. We're not paying attention to it at all.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that, and it gets more and more difficult because there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but I want to make sure that we're actually addressing Starfinder and talking about it. And things like this thing that happened at Gen Con where it was like, no, we want all of your books, and they're all gone. It was like, that justifies that. Enough for, even though it's going to be a really busy week for me, it was like, we need to start this show as soon as we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just glad that the team, because it is really a big imposition for me to come in and be like, hey, guess what? We're doing a show, and you guys have to help. But thanks for, being working with me on that, because
Delighted.
It is work. But
more than happy.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we're talking about Starfinder and keeping up on it. And speaking of that, talking about Starfinder at Gen Con, there was a little announcement that was made.
There was.
And it wasn't even, we didn't bury the lead. We put it right there on Front Street. I think it was the very first panel that we did of Gen Con.
It was the very first Starfinder 101 panel, Thursday morning, right around noon. We got right into it immediately.
And what did we announce to everybody?
We announced that we're doing a Starfinder beginner box.
Yes. Yes.
And there's actually a little backstory behind that. When we were... For people that have picked up the first edition Pathfinder core rulebook, that is a rulebook that is designed to allow you to play the game if you already know how to play it. So when we were doing the Starfinder core rulebook, we wanted it to be a much gentler introduction to both role-playing in general and this game in specific, and Amanda in particular did a lot of work with examples of play and how to introduce it and getting people in, and I love those chapters. It's one of my favorite sections of the book. I think one of the reasons that this has been so successful is all the hard work that has been done, especially by Amanda, on getting that section so that people can get into this, so it doesn't just look like a wall of text. So literally last year people were asking me, are you going to do a beginner box? And I was saying, no, we don't need to do a beginner box. Unlike Pathfinder, we have the introduction here in the core rulebook. Did I mention earlier that we got some of these things wrong? So it turns out there's been a huge cry for a beginner box.
Yes.
A lot of people want to introduce this to their friends or family members or have something that they can get involved with. And we also, one of the fascinating things at the Starfinder 101 panel was we asked how many people had played Pathfinder before, and how many people played Starfinder before, and how many had not played either.
I missed that part.
About a third of the crowd had not ever played either game before. So we're actually reaching out to a new audience that had not and it might have been before we actually started the panel.
Right.
We're reaching a new audience that has not played Paizo role-playing game products before, and that was sort of...
That is great.
I mean, obviously we're delighted, but that was sort of not where we expected such a big section of our audience to come from. And that's one of the reasons why a beginner box makes sense at this point, to be able to reach out and introduce people that are sort of interested, but when they pick up a 545-page book, that's a little intimidating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And Amanda, I'll ask you, when I first was able to announce the beginner box and put that up there, the first thing I got was, oh, it's been out for a year. If I would have gotten this a year ago, maybe I would have played a lot sooner. What is the answer to that? Like, what do you have to say to folks that wish that they would have seen this beginner box product come out quicker so that they could have learned with everybody together in an easier format?
So I'd say that really the delay in the release really gives you time to investigate what the game is, what the flavor of the game is, what the game looks like. You're seeing promotional posters for it in your game store. You perhaps are attending conventions. You're seeing Paizo running demos of this in our booths, and you're really getting a sense for what it is that you're getting into. Perhaps you have always kind of wanted to play a role-playing game, but fantasy is not necessarily your flavor. We found that Starfinder really does appeal to people of a younger demographic sometimes even that want to get into role-playing games but haven't really picked a vector that has appealed to them. And since Starfinder is in some ways in its own niche and takes place in its own campaign setting that's outside of any other really large IPs, that this is a game a lot of people are interested in. And so you know, the time to investigate what it is that you might be getting into is there, and just talking to people who've already played the game, so that if you're a little bit nervous about you know, the rules density of it, or if you're wanting to run a game but you've never done it before, and you know, a 500-page core rulebook is intimidating for you, being able to have that beginner box is a way to get into that in a way that is less time-consuming, is less intimidating, is less daunting than if you were to jump entirely into a very new type of role-playing game and even just a new hobby in general.
Right.
The other thing I think is worth mentioning is that the fact that we waited to start this product means that we have a better idea from feedback on what things need more explanation, how to introduce concepts to people, because there's stuff in Starfinder that is new, and if we had released this first, there would have been no way to know what parts of it we need to explain better, what parts of it people grok quickly, what parts of it we maybe need to do a little hand-holding. So by releasing the core rulebook, we then get feedback and saying, oh, I really like the core rulebook, but I don't understand like death and dying as well. And it's like, well, okay, well, that's something we can look at, we can see. Are these areas where we need to have a better set of rules, or are these areas where we need to be able to do more introduction, more hand-holding, more explanation? Yeah. So I think the end product will be better for it.
Nice.
Oh, when you make a really good point that it allows us to curate the game experience for a beginner, whether it's for a GM or whether it's for a player. We are really sort of deep diving into the section of the audience that is brand new and that might not know as much about role-playing or tabletop games in general, and creating an experience for them that is literally right out of the box, that then if they decide that they're very into it, that they want to get into, you know, the full game or a more complicated game, then they now have a stepping stone to do that with this product that we're releasing.
And it means that if that happens, if they say, hey, I'm excited, I want to get other stuff now, again, if we'd done this first, there would not have been an Alien Archive, there would not have been a completed adventure path, there would not have been the Pact World setting book. So now if we get someone interested, we have content that they can immediately go and get excited about and see what parts of that make sense for them. Whereas if this had been our first product, if you'd gotten excited and you wanted to go get more, we wouldn't have had a whole lot more for you.
Right.
Yeah. And Starfinder Society for organized play as well. There are dozens of scenarios for Starfinder Society if you want to play on a regular basis. This is yet another vector to get into that, you know, if, again, you don't have as much experience with the full game.
Yeah, the organized play team for Starfinder is doing a tremendous job putting out fun, fascinating content, but that just does take time. And so, again, if someone gets involved now and they want to go get involved in Starfinder Society, there is more for them to do. Instead of when we first started, we had a few things ready to go at launch, but obviously you can't have 20 scenarios ready in the first month of a release, right? Yeah. So that just takes time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do think, you know, the one thing that I get, because when I'm on social media and Starfinder comes up, the one thing that I get the most is they just want more content, more content, more content. And I think that you know, the only thing that I can equate it to is that it's a totally different monster than what we've done before, you know, and it does take time, frustratingly so. It does take time.
It does, and one of the things that we have to decide is what is the best way to deliver content to people, right? So obviously we started with a 545-page book. If we tried to make all our books 545 pages, we would be releasing maybe one book a year, maybe one book every 15 months, and people would not be able to get stuff in between. So we are trying to be nimble. We're trying to create content that fills the both play space and the rule space as we get feedback for people what they are most interested in. And that's just a tricky thing to get right. We are constantly taking a look at what people are saying, what they want, what's popular, and trying to adjust our releases to do that. But there's a significant lead time to these things.
Right. And this is something that I'm sure both of you would be able to answer and probably have different perspectives. But and I have no idea about this, so I'm genuinely wondering, when it comes to something like the Alien Archive, which is going to be a little bit different in Starfinder than what you would find, say, with Pathfinder. It's different than a bestiary because they're not just creatures that you're fighting. But there's a lot of them that you can actually play as. So, and I think it kind of builds to that world-building universe of different, types of aliens and things. What does that do to the development cycle of not just a bestiary now, but it's actually like a player companion, almost like a.
It's got player options as well as GM options in the aliens, right?
What does that do to the development cycle of something like that?
So there are have to be multiple waves of conversations, right? So in Pathfinder, there are like entries for dwarves and elves in the bestiary, but that sort of dropped off as we did more and more of these things, because once we'd covered sort of basic NPC options, we didn't keep going back to that well. But that's because the sort of environment that you expect for a fantasy game is just different for a science fiction game. Everything from the cantina scene in Star Wars is a famous example, right? Which is just a menagerie of different creatures. But even if you're looking at modern science fiction, science fantasy movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? There's a lot of different races and a lot of different scenes, especially when they go to nowhere. So we want to talk about what niches of creatures that people might want to play have we covered? What do we want to cover? Which are popular enough that we should cover them in multiple different ways? So we've done things like release player character undead, and player characters that are shape changers, and player characters that are size medium albino minotaurs, right? There are things that we are doing. A personal favorite. But
he wanted those so bad.
I did. I wanted one thing in Alien Archive, and it was the noir, and I got it. It is a different set of conversations to what does the game need that should work as opponents or even as allies. So it does mean that there's more work going into that conceptually. The rules are also different, right? It's a different set of skills to say this will be interesting and balanced for a player versus this is interesting and balanced to shoot and kill. If we introduce a monster and it's something that we expect you to be fighting, that is likely to show up in an encounter, and then it's gone. When we introduce something that's a player race, anything that we make available to the players could be with a campaign for the entire campaign. So you've got to take a pretty serious look at how do we make sure that that is fun and interesting for the player, but it does not introduce problems that then the GM and all the other players have to deal with for an entire campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that it means that we need to be more holistic when we're looking at what types of stories these creatures are facilitating. Unlike a traditional bestiary, like Owen was saying, these are not just big bad guys that are sacks of hit points for you to knock down while you're adventuring and steal their stuff. Certainly that role exists, and certainly that's still important in our game because it's still a tabletop role-playing game. But we want to open it up for space opera adventures, and we want to open it up for intrigue type of adventures, and urban settings and wilderness settings, and exploring, and sort of like conquering new challenges, and just having things happen in the game that might be outside of your traditional sword and sorcery type of adventuring. And so Starship Combat is a great example of that. One of the major tropes in science fiction is you're on your starship and you're going from planet A to planet B, and something happens, and all of a sudden everything lurches to the side, and the captain shouts to check the radar, and we're under attack. And that is a scene that we wanted people to be able to play out in Starfinder. And so we put things in our Alien Archive like creatures that you might encounter as a surprise that they've snuck on your starship, creatures that you encounter when you come to a strange new alien world, creatures that may or may not be good guys or bad guys depending on what the context is, and creatures that perhaps you want to play as a player character. And opening some of those up for organized play is really our way of trying to create that cantina scene and allow that to be a realistic experience in tabletop RPGs instead of just good guys and bad guys. As development, we need to approach it as what are storytelling elements and tools that we can give our players and also our GMs.
Okay. So then coming from something like the Alien Archive and understanding that it is playable and creatures that you're going to be killing, a good combination of both. When it comes to something like the beginner box, and I'm not even sure, how much can we talk about with the beginner box?
So the beginner box is, I was literally having a conversation before coming here about how to solve an issue we're running into in the beginner box, and there are two different ways we could go with it, and I left that mid-conversation. So as I'm sitting here, I literally don't know which route we're taking.
Okay.
So one of the things about the beginner box is we can talk about design goals all we want, but until that thing is sent off to the printer, there is the chance that even if we thought, oh, we're definitely going to have this element, this thing, this class, this rule, whatever, we could be wrong. There are all sorts of reasons why we could end up, again, taking that holistic approach she was talking about. Yeah. There are a lot of needs ranging from the story need to rules balance to introducing concepts so that people can play the beginner box when we've introduced them to all of the concepts they need for the full Starfinder role-playing game. So we're not sure what all's going to be in it yet, in a definitive sense. We've got drafts of everything, but there really is, we go through many development passes, we go through many editing passes, there's layout, there are approvals, there are a lot of steps between where we are and where we are 100% sure of everything's going to be in the book. Yeah. So I'm sure that what we have, 90% of that is going to be what goes in the book, but that 10%, I don't know where that's going to fall yet.
Right, and it's that 10% that you're going to get called on if it's not in
exactly,
there.
Exactly.
You know, now here's the thing, when I first put the image of the beginner box up, I had people automatically that were, I want more images, like what can you give me, blah, 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 and I'm like, literally you've seen everything that we have available right now. And then just before the show, I was talking to Amanda, and she was, she got us some images. Yeah. So folks, I'm here to say, we've got some images that you've not seen anywhere else. Like this is kind of some preview images of what's going to be inside the beginner box. It's not stats, it's not maps, it's nothing spoilery, right?
Yeah, in the same way that we literally cannot tell you what is in the books, we actually probably can tell you what some of the art is going to be, because it turns out it takes a while to draw things and put them into color and make them look awesome. So we have some awesome stuff.
So let's get into some of the art. I have 3 pieces of art here. I'm going to put one up, and then you tell me if you have anything to say about it. You totally can. The first one I have here is an envoy, and it facing a being of some kind. Yeah. And so, you know, I think that I think it looks beautiful, but if there's anything you can talk about around it, feel free. Otherwise, we can just, you know, say how beautiful this is and then move on to the next one.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it. So whatever you have, feel free.
Lori in chat had called this out before you even put this image up as the floating brain people being some of the coolest creatures in Starfinder. I saw that. I was like, let's start with this one. And it was perfect. I said, oh, good. Then they're going to be very happy with this image that we've got here. This is our iconic envoy, Navasi, and she is indeed interacting with a contemplative, and the context of this image is, I think, still needs to remain a mystery, but it sort of goes to illustrate exactly the types of interactions that you might have with the beginner box game rules. It is certainly not out of the realm of possibility that there would be an in-game interaction with this type of creature, with either maybe some published adventures or with what your GM is sort of putting in front of you.
What I think it is important to talk about, again, is that design goal. When we're talking about the beginner box, we want this box to boil down the essence of what we see as Starfinder to be as complete as possible, while accepting that we cannot fit 540 pages of content into 96-page booklets and have it all be in there. But it is important that we have those multiple kinds of stories, right? So what that art is showing is that not everything is about shooting things. Yeah. I think an important part of role-playing are those stories, like Amanda was talking about, the stories that people want to tell, and we want to make sure that we have support for different kinds of stories, even in this less complex, less meaty, less difficult to absorb section of the rules. So we want to make sure that if what excites you and your players is exploring strange new worlds, meeting new civilizations, maybe I've heard that before in science fiction somewhere,
totally new.
But legally distinct from any similar phrase.
Legally distinct, I like it.
But we want those stories to be available to you in the beginner box as well as in the core rule book, and that is why we've got some art like that is not just about pew pew pew.
Yeah, and I think the envoy is a really good class to illustrate those type of interactions, because the envoy is not necessarily built around shooting things or killing things or being, you know, very aggressive. Certainly you can play an envoy like that, but the abilities of the envoy are very much around supporting your allies and just sort of buffing and sort of being in the role of the leader of the group. That's a very natural leader type of character. In fact, Navasi is the leader of the group of Iconics. And so if you want to play that type of character, the rules very much allow you to build into that. It's not something that you need to just figure out how to do on your own.
Right, right. Yeah. And also, we can't actually speak, because there are people that I think might have figured out the whole nature of the photo of the painting is that the contemplative is vaping, but we can't actually speak to that. We can't confirm or deny because spoilers.
At the moment, you'll see that smoke is currently featured in a lot of these illustrations just because of the environment we're living in right now, where the air outside is just
draw from what you know.
Draw from what you know.
Love
so vapor is going to show up in these illustrations a
lot. And also, thank you for subscribing. Boring old Tyler. Thank you for subscribing. That's awesome. Let's go on to the next one, which was going to be the first one, but now it's the second one because I wanted to get the contemplative first.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go to a little bit of a battle. A gun battle is going on right now. And this is, let's see, the Operative.
Yes, this is ISEF, our iconic Operative.
It is so much farther away than I thought it would be right now. So I can barely see it. But I do remember it was ISEF with a little, with a gun. Right, or a pistol of some kind.
A rifle.
A rifle.
Oh, is it a rifle?
It's a long arm.
I can't see a dang thing back here. Is there anything we can talk about with this one?
So speaking of pew pew pew, one of the
yes, that's right.
significant options available to you in Starfinder when you're playing or running a game is you can shoot things that are attempting to harm you. And so ISEF the Operative, of course, that is a class that is very much built around stealth and very much built around being good at dodging around and doing damage to enemies and sort of faking them out in some sense. For those of you familiar with like the Trick Attack class feature, this is very much showing that in a little bit more of a traditional fight. However, the environment is also very Starfinder as well. It's sort of an urban type of environment too. Yeah, which is appropriate for ISEF.
It is. One of the things I think people like about Starfinder is that even if you are, say, in a dungeon setting facing ancient aliens with relics, your character can very much come from a modern sensibility. So some of the ideas and language and mannerisms that might not feel appropriate in a Pathfinder or other fantasy game, no matter what your character is doing, you can have the same sorts of modern attitudes in your character. And so that urban setting is one of the things that, again, we want to be able to show people, hey, you can have an adventure on an abandoned asteroid, you can have an adventure in an ancient starship, but you can also just have an adventure down a dark alley. Right. And we want to be able to support all of those different stories. So I think Starfinder is in some ways, popular as it is, popular enough to have won the fan favorite Origins Award for RPG, because it's got a really broad range of environments and adventure types and character types that you can play from it. And I think it doesn't take as much effort to think about what would I be doing if I was an android and I had access to advanced technology and I had guns. Those are things that are sort of more directly connected to our lives. But we've also dropped in, there's magic and psionic powers and psychic abilities and all that other weird stuff, so that those are both areas you can draw from. And again, we're trying to show people in the art the kinds of things that are available in the beginner box and therefore representative of the Starfinder game in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got one more.
Yep.
We sure do.
And here we have some people just standing around in Seattle.
That's
what Seattle looks like right now.
This is us walking to the parking lot.
We may have overdone it with the art that's describing the environment outside.
It is smoky as heck around here, folks. I'm not kidding.
I just labeled this one toxic because I looked at it and I was like, there's so much going on here. If you really want to look into it, like who the people that are all together, the iconics that we're seeing right now, and and all that. What do we have to say about this image that I've labeled toxic?
So this image is illustrating a toxic environment, and perhaps most importantly, is also a good example that we will have many of the same elements of the core game in the beginner box, as far as like specific rules elements you can use for your games. One of those things are the environment rules. We will be providing rules for running games in non-standard environments, so on planets other than ones exactly like here on Earth, where we can usually breathe okay outside. And can go in and out of buildings.
Current situation notwithstanding.
The atmosphere typically tends to support our biology. Now, we're not saying 100% anymore because outside, but in Starfinder there are planets with all sorts of environments, right? And this is an example of the Iconics there walking through an environment that would be toxic and that they would not be able to survive in without you know, some environmental protections of their armor and things like that.
Owen, do you have anything to say about this one?
Just that this is one of the reasons that we've got new art in this box set, right? We also have some art that we really love from the existing material that we are using because it is very illustrative of what we want to do. But sort of, we want to be able to inspire both players and game masters. The game master is sort of the most important player in a group, because with no game master there is no game. We want to fire their imagination on the sorts of stories they can tell and give them some guidance visually on what sorts of things we think this game will do well. Nice.
So I think that kind of covers most of the stuff that we had planned to talk about.
Sure.
I believe we kind of...
we gave the Gen Con recap slightly short shift, but I will mention that with one exception, all of the Starfinder seminars are available to watch now, right?
So absolutely they are. They are available as a podcast with no direction that you can find on their website. Right here on our Twitch channel, if you do some searching through our videos, you'll find a playlist that is video of all of our panels that we have done. They've been made their own highlight and have their own titles, so you should be able to peruse the Starfinder ones very easily.
So that's almost all of the Gen Con content in your pocket. So.
Yeah, and then I did want to circle back around before we get to some Q&A, because we should have some time for that.
Sure.
Aside from Starfinder experiences, how was your Gen Con?
Exhausting, but awesome.
Yeah.
Mine was also awesome. A lot of running around, a lot of place A to place B in very short periods of time, but it's great. I love Gen Con. It's my 13th Gen Con in a row. Of course, I was a fan long before I was a freelancer, before I was a game professional.
Right.
But you know, really just seeing the changes that Gen Con has undergone always kind of gets me a little bit every year. Remembering what it was like my first year, it was like the second year in Indianapolis, and it was on the other side of the convention center, and it was about 20,000 people, I believe. And I remember thinking, this is the largest crowd I've ever seen in my life.
This is amazing.
Yeah, and then, you know, they had the big opening ceremony, and they opened the doors, and people casually filtered into the dealer hall. And, you know, I thought, this is chaos. It can't possibly get any larger than that. And then it did. And it did, and it did, and it did. And it's escalated to what it is now, which is between 60 and 70,000 people.
And they sold out last year. They sold out again this year.
It's nuts.
Yes.
It is great.
And as a result, one of the interesting things about what that means from my experience is that Indianapolis really goes all out to try and welcome gamers in general. Several of the restaurants have themed menus.
Yep.
A lot of them, instead of having sports on television, they've got geeky movies and television shows.
Oh, they try.
When we were leaving, right, and that is, I'm talking about the Monday after the convention, the airport had set up tables for people to play games at while waiting for their flight or having a connection. So that's a level of embracing of gamer culture, of the whole getting to game, that I just don't run into anywhere else, right? There are a lot of game companies here in Seattle. It's one of the reasons why I moved out here.
Throw a rock.
But the airport doesn't care, right? The airport's still the airport. You can go to Mox or the AFK Tavern or Zulu's or something, pardon me, and have that in a microcosm, but to have an entire city just go berserk for trying to support you and your idea.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, and Gen Con is hosting our stream right now, so thank you for hosting us. That's super nice of you to do. I just really liked the way that everybody seemed to come together and really try their best to give a good experience for everybody, really be there in the same spirit of what it is. And I thought that you know, it was a pretty good attention to detail on Gen Con's part, like a lot of the things, you know, that they were taking care of. And not only that, but the stuff like you were mentioning with restaurants and things, the stuff that we had done with Scotty's. If you have not seen the shirt that was made, which is great. It's the little the goblin iconic with instead of little bombs, they're like grapefruit, I think, or something like that.
Oh yeah,
it's like a grapefruit ale or something.
Yeah, that's
I
what
think.
it was. Yeah.
And so just things like that, it was just amazing. It was like I guess as a Fallout player, it's the immersion. Like, it's important.
Right.
Like, you just feel like you're immersed in this thing, and instead of being a wasteland, it is it is a full-on just gamer's paradise. Like, there's stuff everywhere.
Yep.
So
I had a bunch of business meetings at various places at Gen Con, and one of them was at Scotty's, and there's just something very different about sitting there. You've got Iron Man playing in the background, and while you're ordering, someone comes by and gives you your specialty D6.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just a different experience than you get anywhere else. So.
And just having your servers at all the restaurants say, "Oh, you're here for Gen Con. What are you doing?" And you tell them, that you're with the company and that you're an exhibitor, and they're genuinely very excited to talk to you and to ask you about how things are going.
When I checked into our hotel, all of the desk staff were in cosplay.
Yes.
Yes.
I loved that.
And that's most of the downtown
That was so
hotels
fun.
anymore.
That was great. I loved that.
Yeah.
There was the coffee place that you give a punch card and you can get dice. It was like right across the street from the
didn't
convention
see that.
center.
That's great.
Can't remember what it was called. But yeah, it was great. It was just that whole again, the immersion. You're just surrounded by that culture, and it's people that are there to have fun. And I loved it. I loved it so much. So
and just the supportive environment is just I think very meaningful for a lot of folks, but especially for professionals as well, because we do have a lot of really long hours. We have a lot of meetings. We're on 24 hours a day. Even when we go back to our hotel rooms, we just kind of crash and then we get back up really early in the morning. It's very much the convention environment of all convention environments.
Some of you have to get up early in the morning. I carefully arranged to not have to do that. But,
I am not smart at conventions.
But Amanda worked really, really hard, as did a whole bunch of people. Making that environment takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate everyone that put that extra work into making it a really unique experience for people.
And being understanding and accommodating of the fact that folks are playing games in the hotel room lobbies and at the restaurants and outside and in the rooms in the hotels. I know I ran a game, I think about Tuesday night before the show started, and it was fairly late and it was in the lobby of the Omni Hotel. And, I'm a very loud, demonstrative GM, and it was a horror game, and there was shrieking, and there was yelling, and there was a character who was speaking only in Spanish, and I'm kind of in the back of my head waiting for somebody to come up and say, you need to keep it down, you need to go somewhere else, you're being disruptive. And they never did, and in fact, afterwards, someone actually walked by and said, I watched your game, and it was really fun, and thank you for doing that. And it's like,
perfect.
You can't get a better environment as a gamer.
They are used to us now, so they can arrange things so that no one that needs to sleep will be right above the Omni lobby, right?
Yeah.
That'll be other people who are
that's
up
what
playing
they do.
games.
That's
right.
probably it.
Yeah.
And then, so before we get into any Q&A, because we've got about 10 minutes left to do some Q&A.
Sure.
I think the first question right off the bat that I would have is tell me everything about that you talked about at the super secret meeting last week.
Oh, see the super secret meeting.
I won't tell anybody.
And I'm sure none of you will tell anybody
fourth
either.
wall, Amanda.
Right?
Come on.
Right?
I very carefully posted that we were discussing the redacted that we are going to put in the product Starfinder redacted, which will be coming out next year. I made that Twitter post already, so I'm totally transparent on what we're doing with this.
How is there still a question?
It's covered.
See, here's the thing about the super secret meeting. We had the super secret meeting in a private home, in the home of Rob McCreary, our creative director.
So we were surrounded by Lego.
We were surrounded by Lego.
Oh, yeah,
he has a Lego room, in fact, in which we discussed redacted, and also redacted. Yeah, indeed. And so, but inside that home is sort of a little bit of the drift, perhaps, maybe. We'd love to tell you all about it if we could, but we encountered a few outsiders. We maybe made a few deals. If I were to say anything, there would be a very small cut on Owen's face that would open up, and you'd hear Jason Keeley scream over from the Star Chamber, and Rob McCreary, who knows what would happen to him. So, because I love my team members, I cannot actually tell you.
This just sounds like it would be a big kerfuffle.
The meeting. It is unfortunately.
Possibly a hootenanny. So, from a somewhat serious point of view, when we are looking at figuring out what we are doing, we're a year into the game now, so we've got a fair amount of feedback. We've covered some of the most obvious products. We had to have an Alien Archive. We have to have an Armory. We had to have the Pact Worlds. There comes a point where you need, as a group, to decide where do we want to take this game. And of course, our creative director, Rob McCreary, has a lot of thoughts on that, but he wants everyone's input. And it can be hard to do that in an office environment. And so Amanda and Rob arranged for the offsite so that we could really focus. And again, it's that immersion. We could be totally focused and not be interrupted on figuring out where we are taking things for some major products and a major direction of the game. And we hope when we do announce what those things are, people will be super excited. But we had to take the time to figure it out first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be better that way.
It should be better.
Yeah. And honestly, though, it was a very sort of long day. We did a lot of work. There was a lot of things that happened at that meeting. I feel like that it was a fairly invigorating experience because we were all together and, you know, we were going through what it was that we needed to talk about and just sort of team building in a sense that we were able to accomplish, you know, so much at just a site where everybody was.
Right.
Yeah, normally that you don't have the vast majority of the Starfinder team together talking Starfinder cut off from distractions, right? We're in an office environment. And so we can't be too loud or we're going to bother the editors and they're making sure that they catch all our mistakes. So I certainly don't want to distract them from anything.
Don't mess with them.
I love my editors. They're the only people in the world paid to make me look smarter. I love my editors. So it was a real, Amanda's right, it was a team building opportunity as well as getting a lot of stuff done. And I hope we do another one. So in fact, I hope we do one next week.
I think we're well, we'll see.
Okay.
Just makes it so much easier to drink.
It does. Coffee, drink coffee.
And tea.
And tea. Actually, Keely did drink tea.
I think there's tea.
Yeah, that is tea, yeah.
I wish I had more water. Owen, I'm sorry, buddy. I wish I had water
if
for you.
I'd been smart, I'd have brought some water.
I know. I'm just, you are a trooper, my
You've
friend.
got your any there.
You are going through this thing
Yeah,
like
but you
crazy.
can't drink an any.
But the smoke is almost done. The smoke is...
Gosh.
So really quick, I got a couple questions. First of all, I want to... the first one that I want to address is I'm seeing in the comments and chat about the minis, and if we're ever going to be getting mass-produced painted minis. Unfortunately, this is not the crowd to talk about something like that. These folks make the books. Those types of things are decisions that are made outside of our scope, outside of our hands. There is an answer that needs to be addressed about this, and I 100% agree with that. I am on your side with this question. However, we are not the ones that can answer that for you, and I'm really hoping that very soon there will be that will be addressed.
If I can speak to that for just a moment.
You know, if you choose to.
Yeah. Anything that is not a book or a book-like product, we need partners in order to make those things available, right? We don't have a 3D printer that we're going to be doing everyone's individual meetings in the back. Anytime you're talking about a business relationship with partners, a lot of talking and decision-making has to get done before you can talk to the public about anything. And it's very much for the same reasons we were talking about why we're not talking about specifics in the beginner box. Until everyone in all the companies involved has agreed on exactly what we're doing, we can't talk about it. One, because anything we say could be wrong, right? Even if they are seconds from a decision, and I'm not saying they are, those are crucial seconds, and it could change at the last moment. So obviously, that's something I personally want. I love our Pathfinder pre-painted minis. I loved the D&D pre-painted minis when I had those. I've backed Reaper Kickstarters. I am a huge fan of miniatures. I do custom mini modifications. I've turned lizardmen into Vesk by carving off spears and putting in laser guns. I would like to not have to go to that much effort. We, as a company, we are absolutely interested in getting that done. As individuals, we are doing everything we can to make that happen. But this just isn't a thing where, unlike with things that are totally in our control, where we can say, hey, we're announcing it, hey, we're working on it, hey, we're going to this point, all the decisions have to be done before we can talk about it. Otherwise, it's not being professional, it's not good business, and we could ruin a good deal by spooking someone or saying something that they don't approve with. So it's much more complicated than doing the things just by ourselves. I feel for you. I promise I do. We all want what you want. And we're going to do our very best to get the best solution to that we can as soon as we can. But Dan's right. And until, not only are we not the people that make those decisions, although we are frequently talked to about it, until those are absolutely set in stone and the ink is dry, we just can't be making even hints about what might be going on, because that could ruin a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, on to things that you might be able to speak to.
Okay.
Let's see. What is the current stage of a development for a Starfinder Empire building framework? So I'm guessing that's like Kingmaker or something like that, but for...
Possibly, or maybe a campaign setting book. It was...
Yeah, and there are a lot of things we could
that
do
could
with
be
that.
a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did put out Pact Worlds, which is our main campaign setting book that, in a way, I don't know if this is exactly what they're asking, but that really does give you the tools to, you know, sort of build a story, even an empire, if you want to build off of all of the hooks. There are expansive write-ups about each of the Pact Worlds in that book, the main sort of solar system where the Starfinder game takes place in, and so those are intended to be for GMs to build off hooks for their own stories and campaigns. So if in that way, that book already exists, but I suspect they might be asking about
So they're asking
something
specifically
else.
For Kingmaker, like.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So Kingmaker did not come out the first year or even the second year of Pathfinder, and there are good rule development and story development reasons for that. We do have whiteboards full of ideas and lists of things that we want to get to. It is on those lists.
That's true.
It is not something that we are ignorant of the possible excitement over. But that is the sort of thing where you want to dip your toe in those waters and see how people respond to it before you put out an entire system. So I
that makes sense.
Again, we have nothing to announce at this time, but it's absolutely on our radar.
Right.
And it's something that we are personally excited about in most cases on the team. Because that would be super cool and super fun, and we'd like those tools as well.
We've got somebody asking a very fair question, I think.
All right.
Sure.
Let's see. Did you see the new shotgun shell combat glove?
Okay.
It's actually built so you shoot yourself. Blah, blah, blah. Insert, repeat.
So yes, of course I've seen the art for that. So assume, since it is a punching weapon, that is in safe mode. And that
safety's on.
And that they spin as you are swinging your fist at them in order so that they would spin and slide forward and you actually punch. That's my assumption. We get to see these things in Sketch, and you know, you're assuming that far future space shotguns look just like our shotgun shells. I understand why you're assuming that. Obviously, sometimes the art and the text do not match up 100%, and that's unfortunate. But there isn't always a way to get that fixed in a reasonable time frame. I would have liked for the shotgun shells to be facing the other direction. I'm one of the people that developed that particular weapon. But, and I'll say this, that's not really on the artist. That is actually on me for having, when I wrote the art description, not being specific enough about how that should look. So that's my fault. I'll take credit for it. I will apologize to all of the people out there that know what a shotgun shell looks like and how it ought to be mounted over a pair of knuckles to hit someone. Let's be honest, though. If you've ever fired a shotgun shell or a shotgun, that is not something that you really should have happening right over the knuckles of your hand with existing world technology anyway. That's just a bad idea.
You need a very strong wrist.
Even shark sticks, right, which have a shotgun shell at the end of a pole, that's designed to move things, you know, at a range. So we were already in the realm of cool over physics. I'm fine with that. We can assume that there are ballistic materials and kinetic fields that make that not a stupid idea in Starfinder. That's fine. Just like lasers work in Starfinder, and they don't really, a handheld laser is a cat toy, not a weapon in the real world. So
not yet.
Yes, not yet. Right. So yes, that is something that you're going to have to you're going to have to do a little hand waving in order for that to make sense. That being safe mode or that being how you reload it are my two personal favorites. Right. If you can pull a trigger and then go that way, so I can pull the shells out and put it in because that is less awkward than this. So just assume that that's in reloading mode and then it'll flip around for combat use.
Yeah. Oh, you know, that's actually not bad. Like the reloader. Like, you know, it pops out and you just kind of like hit it and then you've got them on there and then they flip around.
And then as your fist is coming up, it's flipping around.
Yeah, totally.
Done. There you go. We've just retconned this whole thing. Everybody can relax.
It's not a mistake. It was intended.
All right. Well,
maybe we shouldn't go that far.
It's not a mistake anymore.
There you go.
We are creeping up at just about that time, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this very first Starfinder. I want to give you a state of things really quick. We are, and because I've seen that we've got a couple of subscribers that have kicked on today, we are working on some more emotes. We just unlocked another 2 slots, I think. We're redoing a couple of them because they didn't quite work the way we thought they were going to. It turns out that making them is a little bit different than we thought. So there you go. So we're redoing a couple of them so you can see them a little bit better. We're adding to they're being approved right now. And then I think this might only apply to Brendan, aka Nitrace, but we do have a little like a bits badge for people that cheer, but we couldn't replace the ones at 100 or anything less. So if anybody happens to cheer to 1,000 bits, which I recommend you don't, I'm not asking for that, but if you happen to, there is a special badge that comes up that's like a little treasure chest, which I thought was kind of cool. So big thanks to Adam Vick from the art team for being so patient with me and my dumb requests for these things. So it should be up and running soon. I don't know how long it'll take for Twitch to approve the other emotes, but they are, I believe, directly related to the live play that we will be starting tomorrow. I've got a critical D20 that's on fire, and I have the Paizo Golem stepping back and saying, "What?" because he's all scared or something. And then, like I said, we're redoing, I think LOL is being redone so you can see it a little bit better. Maybe not ready for tomorrow's big game, but we encourage you to tune in tomorrow at 2 p.m. So you can watch the Pathfinder playtest. I think tomorrow will be Jason Bowman and 5 ready-to-play players from Paizo offices that we're forcing away from their desk. So
forcing at gunpoint to come play a game.
I mean,
how terrible!
It's the serious business of fun, Owen. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me, and I want to say thank you to Owen and Amanda for joining me on the first episode of Starfinder Wednesday. That might change. Who knows?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us. This was a great time.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that came on and watched.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. This will be up on YouTube soon. And we'll be here all week. I'll be here all week. You'll get tired of me by the end of the week because I'll be here a lot. So for Owen and Amanda and for Paizo and for me, your old buddy Dan Tharp, have a great rest of your week. Stay out of the weather if you can, and we will see you tomorrow.